This morning we published a report titled More Than a Human Can Bear, dealing with Israel's systematic use of sexual, reproductive and other forms of gender-based violence since 7 October 2023. Our report finds that Israel has increasingly employed sexual, reproductive and other forms of gender-based violence against Palestinians as part of a broader effort to undermine their right to self-determination. It also concludes that Israel has carried out genocidal acts through the systematic destruction of sexual and reproductive healthcare facilities. The report documents a broad range of violations perpetrated against Palestinian women, men, girls and boys across the occupied Palestinian territory since 7 October 2023 that constitutes a major element in the ill treatment of Palestinians and are part of the unlawful occupation and persecution of Palestinians as a group. The report released today summarises the findings of our investigations since October 2023 into these issues. It is the first in-depth UN investigation into sexual, reproductive and other forms of gender-based violence by the Israeli security forces and Israeli settlers since October 2023. The methodology used in preparation of the report is set out in paragraph 6 of the document released today. It's the standard methodology for UN investigations of this kind. Our report is based on interviews with victims and witnesses, including expert medical witnesses, some of whom appeared during the public hearings which we have conducted over the last 2 days. The report lists a number of conclusions. I draw your attention to one that perhaps best summarises the bottom line at the end of our investigations. That's contained in paragraph 223. The frequency, prevalence and severity of sexual and gender-based crimes perpetrated across the occupied Palestinian territory leads the Commission to conclude that sexual and gender-based violence is increasingly used as a method of war by Israel to destabilise, dominate, oppress and destroy the Palestinian people. The Commission documented a pattern of sexual violence, including cases of rape and other forms of sexual violence, torture and other inhumane acts that amount to war crimes and crimes against humanity. Israel continues to obstruct the Commission... Israel continues to obstruct the Commission's investigations and prevent its access not only to Israel itself, but also to the occupied Palestinian territory. As mentioned in the report, several requests for information and access were sent to the Government of Israel, including requests for information on specific cases of sexual and gender-based violence carried out by members of the Israeli security forces. The Commission has not received any information about prosecutions of members of the Israeli security forces or Israeli settlers for sexual and violence committed since October 2023. The report is published on our website today. It is being translated into Arabic and Hebrew, and those translations will be published on the website as soon as they are available. We are also having some infographics prepared that try to present in visual form much of the data, particularly the statistics in the report itself. We hope that they will be on our website by the end of the week. Your second question dealt with the response from the Israeli mission here in Geneva. I was quite surprised to see that response. Netanyahu has said that Israel will not participate in the Council or any of its processes. So I'm worried that the Israeli mission here may be disciplined for breaching that order of the Prime Minister of Israel. So, yeah, a bit surprised. Look, the bottom line is, as usual, it's all lies. They clearly do not read our documents. They clearly have an agenda that they pursue, totally devoid from any relationship to fact. It's just chronic lying. I note a very rapid turnover of the staff dealing with media at the Israeli mission here. I assume that's because they are people with journalistic backgrounds who get fed up with having to lie all the time. I note that even Hagari now has finally given up. So I don't take it very seriously.
Good morning, thank you. Your findings in relation to destruction of reproductive healthcare and preventing birth focuses very particularly on the Basma IVF clinic. I just wondered if you could elaborate on why you conclude that this was deliberately targeted. Thank you.
The Basma IVF clinic was the largest fertility clinic or program in Gaza, the largest by far. There are smaller fertility services provided in some of the hospitals, but Basma was the best known and the largest by far. Its location was extremely well known, and it's posted on its building itself as a medical clinic, and the logo indicates women and children. So the first part of intention, I think, is very clear. It was known to anybody who was standing outside that building that it was a medical facility. The Israeli authorities have geolocations for all healthcare and other protected facilities in Gaza. By protected, I include schools, shelters, locations of internally displaced persons, and so forth. So certainly the Israeli authorities would know what the purpose of that clinic was. There is a question about whether those who were firing the tank shell, because our conclusion is that it was destroyed by a tank shell, knew at that time that it was a fertility clinic, but certainly their commanders knew, and the commanders would have known that there were tanks operating within that vicinity and firing on buildings and fired on a healthcare facility that was clearly marked. So it's not possible to say that the destruction of the building was unintentional or accidental. There is an issue about whether it was specifically aimed at the fact that it was a fertility clinic, but given what we know about the circumstances of the attack and the data that is available to the Israeli military authorities and the way in which the war has been conducted, we were able to conclude on reasonable grounds that it was an intentional attack on a healthcare facility that was providing reproductive services.
Thank you, Dina Bisab. I represent several Arabic media. My question is about the images that we are seeing almost daily since the beginning of the war in Gaza. In the past, the leak of very few images from Abu Ghraib, for example, in Iraq, was enough to make a scandal. Today, we have seen hundreds, maybe thousands of images and videos from the prisons and prisoners very badly treated, as you explained in your report, but no changes, and we feel that as if the world is not treating this as a scandal anymore. As a lawyer, you said that you are a lawyer. How do you describe this? Thank you.
I describe it, Nina, as willful ignorance, even willful denial on the part of the international system. I accept that there is a intense competition for news coverage these days. It's very difficult to get tragic situations, the coverage that they require in the international media. You must, all of you, know that yourself, how hard it is to get coverage for these things when there is so much else going on. And that's part of the story, but it's known. We deal at some length in the report at the stripping and the physical and psychological abuse of men and boys. The report deals very much with sexual violence against women, but in this situation, it's also sexual violence against men and boys. And we heard evidence, you would have heard it if you were looking at our hearings during the last 2 days, where men and boys were forced to strip wholly or almost wholly, that is down to underpants, and then were kept in that condition, often having to sit on stones on the ground in the cold, in winter, for up to 3 days. Now, this is physical abuse, but it's also psychological abuse. It's designed to humiliate. So we have no doubt at all, on the basis of the evidence that we received, what is going on. But to get these events the international attention and international action that they deserve has proved a task that we find frustrating, but that the Palestinian victims must find increasing their humiliation, increasing the demeaning conduct that they are being exposed to. There is an urgent need for accountability. Not just accountability because perpetrators of past crimes should be punished, that's called justice, but also accountability as a means of prevention. These things continue to occur because no one is ever held accountable. They're not held accountable in Israeli military courts, they are not held accountable in Israeli civil courts, and when we see the first tentative efforts at international accountability, we see the kind of hysterical, illegal reactions from some parts of the international system. So this will continue unless and until there is accountability. And the victims can only feel frustrated at our failure. It is our failure as an international system.
Thank you. Going back to the maternity and the clinic, the question is blunt. Do you consider that giving birth today to a child in Gaza amounts to giving a death certificate at the same time?
Amounts to giving a death sentence?
Death certificate at the same time.
Oh, death certificate, I'm sorry. In many cases it does, but not all. But I would certainly say that any child born in Gaza today has a risk of death, of dying while an infant or as a young child, greater than almost any others in the world. The killing at the moment has not stopped entirely, but it is much less. But we know that over the last 18 months, 33% of those who have been killed are children. A third. Now that statistic alone should cause us to sit up in shock and then do something about it. Children today not only experience, or babies not only experience, the kind of deprivation that we describe in the report. You know, the breastfeeding mothers who, because of malnutrition, ill health, high rates of infection, have difficulty providing breast milk. The fact that formula is almost impossible to obtain, and when it is obtained, it must be mixed with water that is generally unsafe and exposes the baby to a very high risk of infection. So you have malnutrition, you have cold, you have babies, newborn babies, often in need of neonatal care, living in tents. And you have, up until 47, 48 days ago, the constant risk of being killed by bombardment. The fact that I think the figure was around about 50,000, 40 to 50,000 babies were born in Gaza last year, is an extraordinary statement of hope on the part of Gaza parents. Hope that their children will live and hope that they will have a future. But anyone who looks at the statistics, we who know from talking to people what is going on, can see that as an act of hope in the middle of a battleground of despair.